Hi gang, today we're going to talk about personality disorders. Everybody has a personality. Each personality, it differs, people's personality differs from one person to another. But when you have a personality disorder, a person has a different way of thinking and behaving. They rub people the wrong way. They seem to keep shooting themselves in the foot with what they say and what they do. And some are actually chronic malcontents. These people that are miscontent, these people that rub the people the wrong way and such, they are the ones we're going to be talking about. This is the ones who have what's called personality disorders. A personality disorder is an enduring pattern of an inner experience and behavior that deviates markedly from the expectation of the individual's culture. It's pervasive, it's inflexible, it's stable over time, and it leads to distress or impairment in interpersonal relationships. And that's one of the ways that a person ends up in a therapist's office with personality disorders is because they start having so many problems interacting with others that they are basically told or advised or coerced into seeking help. Everybody has a personality, but not everybody has a personality disorder. A personality is a characteristic way in which a person exhibits thoughts, feelings, perceptions, and the way that they relate. Generally, for most personality disorders, there's not medication to treat the disorder as such. Now, some of the secondary symptoms they can treat, like if there's anxiety that goes along with one, then they can give them some kind of medicine for that. But generally, this is one of those disorders that require therapy and less medication. There are 3 groups of personality disorders. These groups are called clusters. And you have cluster A, cluster B, and cluster C. All right, cluster A personalities, the disorders located under this group name, there are the paranoid personality disorder, the schizoid personality disorder, and the schizotypal personality disorder. The cluster A, they are people that have a eccentric, odd type of personality. Some people describe them as the weird ones. They're odd, they're eccentric. And cluster B, they're going to be your overly emotional, overly reactive, dramatic, drama queen type of individuals. Cluster C, that's your anxious people, your fearful people. Cluster B, they're often called the wild ones, the wild group. And cluster C are often called the wimpy groups, okay? Cluster B personality disorders, they've got antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, and narcissism. Again, cluster B personality disorders, they're dramatic, they're emotional, they're drama queens, and they are described as the wild ones. Cluster C personality disorders, you have your avoidant personality disorder, your dependent personality disorder, and your obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Okay, in talking about cluster A, the first one to be talked about is the paranoid personality disorder. The paranoid is somebody, first of all, paranoids tend to be very, very intelligent. They tend to be very intelligent. They're constantly calculating, and they are very hard to treat because they don't trust the therapist. And not only do they not trust the therapist, they try to stay one jump ahead so that they don't fall into any traps that the therapist might be setting according to their mindset. The paranoid expects somebody to exploit them or harm them. They do not trust people. They are often challenging the fidelity of their spouse. Also, they can doubt the trustworthiness of their friends and family. They will read hidden malice into innocent acts. They keep a score sheet. They bear grudges. And they're very, very quick to anger. They don't trust easily, if at all. They hold grudges. If you challenge them, or if you provoke them, they will counterattack. They are what we used to call a neurotic type of personality. That means that they have an emotional disturbance without any psychotic symptoms. They are not psychotic, okay? About 0.5 to 2.5% of the population are deemed narcissism or narcissistic. The schizoid. These are people who are really, really detached from others. They're kind of stuffy and they are aloof, okay? They have a profound effect in the ability to form personal relationships. They're indifferent to others, indifferent to personal relationships. They are aloof and detached. They often are anhedonic, which means they lack the ability to experience pleasure. They will have a constricted affect, and they are generally people who like to be by themselves. They have problems with social relationships. They don't want to commit to social relationships because they want to stay detached from them. They don't have very high feelings about others. They have little desire for sex, and they experience little pleasure in life. It makes sense then that they would have very few or no friends. They're very indifferent to praise or criticism. Doesn't make a difference to them. People might describe them as being a cold type person and detached. About 2% of the population. We'll talk about schizotypal shortly. The cluster B personality disorders. These are your antisocial personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, and borderline personality disorder. when we are talking about antisocial personality disorder, first of all, realize we are not talking about somebody who doesn't like to be around people, that, we say, oh, they're antisocial, and you mean that they just want to be by themselves, or they're rude to other people, or such as that. That's not what antisocial personality disorder is. The antisocial personality has no guilt, no shame. They're immoral. Sometimes they will, the extreme ones can become criminals. They tend to exploit people. They have little or no empathy toward others. They tend to be very cruel, self-serving, unloving. They are unresponsive to consequences. They constantly have problems with work, school, law, with the law, etc. They have no respect of the rights of others. And it's not uncommon for those who have committed illegal acts to have a personality, antisocial personality present. The antisocial personality has no problem lying to people. They are the con men. They manipulate people. They love to suck somebody into a scam. They can be very impulsive. They do not plan ahead in general. They disregard the safety for themselves and others. They're irresponsible and they lack remorse. Now, if they get caught doing something and they start expressing remorse, you have to listen very carefully, because they may just be expressing remorse for getting caught, not for the act. Your antisocial personality, there's about 3% of the males in our population and 1% of the females that have this disorder. It is very, very, very hard to treat an antisocial person. It is, the reason is because, first of all, they're not going to trust you. They're smart enough to pick up on things where they can tell you what they think you want to hear and manipulate the therapist. They may improve with time, but don't count on it. Now, in the past, there was a theory that was called the sociopathy triad. And they said that if a child wet the bed, was cruel to animals, and liked playing with fire, well, this indicated that they may very well be headed for antisocial personality disorder, and even more serious, becoming a sociopath. That would be wetting the bed, fire setting, and animal cruelty. Now, you cannot diagnose a child with antisocial personality disorder. We used to call anti-personality disorders the sociopaths and the psychopaths, okay? You cannot diagnose a child as being an antisocial person. So, if they have a problem with authority, if they refuse to do what they've been told to do, if they tend to be bullies and having real behavioral problems in childhood and lying and such, they may have a disorder that's called oppositional defiant disorder. Now, oppositional defiant disorder, that's kind of like antisocial disorder for children. Now, if that is not nipped in the bud, and if the parent doesn't do something to help that, when the child becomes an adolescent, then he can be diagnosed with conduct disorder. Or if the teenager develops these types of behavior of stealing, truancy, lying, shoplifting, all kinds of anti-social types of behavior, violating society norms and their rules, then the teenager will probably be diagnosed with conduct disorder. Now, if conduct disorder has not been addressed, then as they become an adult, it becomes antisocial personality disorder. Now, antisocial personality disorder at its extreme would be something like your serial killers, okay? If you go into the prisons, you're going to find a very, very high population of your antisocial personality disorder individuals. These are people that don't care about rules. They have their own rules, and God forbid if anybody breaks their rules. Another example of an extreme antisocial personality disorder would be like a hitman that gets paid to murder people, okay? If you had somebody that shoplifted all the time, and they just loved shoplifting and loved, and they lied all the time and such, and they had no remorse and no conscience, and they didn't worry about how much it cost somebody or if they stole something of somebody that was dear to them. Well, this falls into the type of antisocial behavior. Now, the next one is called histrionic. When Freud was treating his patients, it was called hysteria. Now, these are your drama queens. They are overly emotional. Everything needs to be exaggerated. Everything is a crisis. Everything has needs to have an extreme reaction, okay? Characteristics of the histrionic: they're attention seekers. They're gregarious. They can be very seductive. They're emotionally labile. That means that their emotions can change, can flip in a second's notice. They might be crying, their eyes out, and then all of a sudden start laughing. Interpersonally demanding. They wear their friends out. They tend to be very shallow people and very vain. They use their physical appearance to get attention. They tend to be very vague in responses, and they are theatrical type people. Remember, they're the drama queens. They have exaggerated emotional expressions. They overestimate the intimacy in relationships. These are the kind that after the first date, they think the person that they just dated is probably interested in them to marry. And they overestimate their position and their intimacy in a relationship. 2 to 3% of the population are histrionic. Well, to treat them, in psychotherapy, you have to be gently confrontational. You have to set boundaries. You have to teach them new ways of relating. But But again, this is one that really doesn't respond well to medication. Narcissism, the narcissistic personality disorder. Well, there are two types of narcissists. One is called the malignant narcissist, the other is the crasher. The reason they call them that is because if you confront a narcissist, the malignant one will immediately turn on you and go into attack mode, where the crasher will be devastated, and it's like you pulled everything out from underneath them, and they are just going to be right on the bottom of the depths. Narcissists are very self-centered. They have very grandiose ideas. They have a mentality of thinking you owe them. The world owes them. They tend to be exploitative. That means that they're going to use people and use them as much and as far as they can. They too lack empathy. They value the people in their life only insofar as those people can worship them, admire them, and keep them as the center of attention. They tend to be very grandiose in their ideas. They have to be admired. They too lack empathy. They have an exaggerated sense of their own importance. And they believe that they are destined to be wealthy, famous, and have a perfect love and a great amount of power. They feel very unique, very special. They think that because they are so special, that they should only associate with people of high status. They have an entitlement mentality. They exploit others, they lack empathy, and they're seen as being arrogant and sometimes envious. They're very sensitive to criticism. About 1% of the population are narcissists, but of that 1%, 75% are males. The borderline personality disorder. This is an incredible personality disorder. It is very, very prevalent. Over 6 million people, 6 million Americans have borderline. A lot of the times when a therapist gets upset with a client and the way that the client is acting in the session, that they'll just put a diagnosis of borderline on them. The diagnosis is 11% of outpatients and 19% of inpatients. 50% of all personality disorders are borderlines. They're 3 times as common in women than men, and they're 5 times more common in first-degree relatives. Borderlines, the reason that therapists don't like working with borderlines is they make people around them crazy. They love chaos. They love crises, and they love to stir these up. One of the defining issues of borderline is they have extreme abandonment issues. Extreme abandonment issues, and they do not respect boundaries. They used to think borderline personality disorder was borderline between
insanity and schizophrenia, but that is no longer true. All right, characteristics of a borderline. Intense, chaotic interpersonal relationships. They will have an incredible number of relationships that have blown up, and it's like a boat. They just have an incredible wake of past relationships. Extreme emotional instability. They tend to be self-destructive, and these are the ones that usually they cut themselves a lot, okay? They're very manipulative, and they tend to do what's called splitting, and that's where they will try and interfere with the relationship between two people, especially if those people have been close. They want to split them up and get it where these two people are at odds with each other. They have very unstable personal relationships, and they keep score. They're going to keep a scorecard of people that have wronged them or hurt them, and they don't forget it. Many will try to get into self-improvement projects or groups to try and get attention. They are manipulative. They will even try suicide to get attention. And they will try suicide, and sometimes they accidentally go too far and carry it out and end up where they kill themselves. I had one client tell me, well, I tried to kill myself this weekend. I've got to be careful because I almost made it. They have an extreme fear of being alone. They have frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. They have a pattern of unstable, intense interpersonal relationships characterized by extremes. They will either idolize the person or devalue and think of that person as a demon. They're straight from the devil. They have an identity disturbance. Sometimes they'll say, I don't really know who I am. I don't understand, what's inside of me. They're markedly and persistently unstable in self-image or sense of self. They have impulsivity in at least two areas that are self-damaging. Areas such as sex, spending, substance abuse, reckless driving, binge eating, etc. That means that they can become very impulsive in that area where they might become sexually promiscuous or go on spending sprees and overspend and get themselves in trouble economically and financially that way. It's not unusual that borderlines will attempt suicide. It's not unusual for borderlines to attempt suicide multiple times. Also, it's not unusual for borderlines to be into self-mutilating behaviors. They will have wild moods. Their affect will be unstable or unstable due to a marked reactivity of mood, such as intense episodic dysphoria or irritability, anxiety, usually lasting a few hours, and on some occasions, even a few days. They will have wild moods. They will complain, there's nothing inside of me. They have chronic feelings of emptiness. And like I said, it's not uncommon for them to say, you know, I don't know who I am and I don't understand myself. They can have impulsive explosions of rage. It can be inappropriate raging. It can be the raging will be intense. The anger is intense. And they normally will have problems actually controlling their anger. These people, they can get to the point that they're just really pushing the edge of the envelope on becoming psychotic. They can become transients, have stress-related paranoid ideation, or even severe dissociative symptoms. That means that they can break away in their mind from reality, okay? We'll study dissociation, I think, next chapter. Okay, what to look for in a borderline? A disturbance in self-concept, unstable interpersonal relationships, impulsive behavior, a labile affect, functional failures and self-destructive activity. Sometimes they will actually become substance abusers and even sexually promiscuous. They have intense beginnings of relationships and intense endings. They will cut off relationships with family members in a heartbeat and not look back. Again, they can have parasuicidal behaviors such as eating disorders. They will have transient psychotic-like symptoms such as delusions, depersonalization, paranoia, and it's not uncommon for them to have a history of sexual abuse, physical abuse, or emotional abuse. If you start wondering if somebody is a borderline, one of the things you do is you look and see, do they have extreme feelings, extreme fears of abandonment? Are they demanding? Do they feel entitled to things? Are they too close or hostile? Do they become too close or too hostile in the treatment relationship with their therapist? Treatment regressions. Well, who are some of the real-life borderlines? Marilyn Monroe, Lawrence of Arabia, Adolf Hitler, Muammar Gaddafi, Princess Diana, Vincent van Gogh, and Roseanne, who was the star of the show Roseanne. One of the first things that you have to do in treatment for a BPD is to make sure that you start setting very strong boundaries. Very strong boundaries. That's one of the things that they have to learn first, is to start honoring boundaries. Freud and psychodynamic, they believe that the borderline failed to mature, and they cannot distinguish between themselves, between the self and other. They're stuck at early development and shift their identity and feelings based on how others react, leading to aggression. You may remember that client-centered therapy, person-centered therapy, they don't believe in diagnosing, and so they believe the person has it within themselves to fix themselves. So that's the goal and the pursuit in client-centered therapy. The belief systems are challenged, and like I said, the boundaries are set, especially with cognitive. The way that borderlines think, the world is dangerous and evil. I am powerless and I am vulnerable. I am inherently unacceptable. I'll be alone and nobody will be there for me. Borderline cannot be treated with medication. Therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy is probably the most effective, or a deviation from that. And again, one of the strongest things that should be done is really hammer down on honoring the boundaries. Cluster C, personality disorders. The personality disorders covered here are avoidant, dependent, and OCD. The avoidant sees themselves as being inadequate. They don't feel like they fit in, and they feel like they're going to embarrass themselves if they get around too many people. They are very socially inhibited. They are hypersensitive to criticism. They avoid social contacts for fear of rejection. They hold back for fear of ridicule. They almost always play it safe. They don't want to take risks because they feel like they're going to embarrass themselves. They're inhibited, introverted, socially uncomfortable. They tend to be anxious and easily hurt. They tend to be shy. They avoid social contact, and they exaggerate dangers of social contact. They're going to tell you all these horrible things that's going to happen if they have to attend this function or go there where there's a lot of people. Less than 1% of the population have avoidant personality disorder. The dependent personality disorder. These people are clingy. They're needy. They don't want to make a decision for themselves. They present themselves as in need of care. They're very submissive. They fear separation from the person they're dependent on. They have to be reassured with everyday decisions. They don't want to disagree, because if they offend the person that they disagree with, the person might leave, and especially if it's the person they're attached to. They fear starting to do something because they don't have any confidence that it will succeed, and they don't have any confidence that they'll finish it. They will go to extremes to gather somebody to nurture them, to love them, and support them. They fear being alone. They have to be in a relationship. They feel like they cannot function unless they are attached to somebody. And they too are very preoccupied with abandonment. Less than 1% of the population are avoidant. Now, I had a client one time, and she had dependent personality disorder, and it was so severe that in the morning she would not pick which cereal to eat. Her husband had to choose what cereal for her to eat every day. He had to choose what kind of an outfit and lay out her clothes every day because she didn't even trust herself to make those kind of decisions. Now, I am running out of time on this particular loop right here. I'm running out of space on the camera here, so I will post something that will give you a much better idea about what OCD is, or I will post another lecture shortly. I hope this has helped. You have a great day. Take care. And thank you.